Hi, I'm Ray Young. I'm an emeritus professor from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I'm going to be giving a series of presentations on the Polynesian cultures of the South Pacific. I'm shown here in the center between two native Maori people in their native dress from Rotorua, New Zealand, and we'll be talking more about that in a later lecture. The lecture series will follow the Polynesian Voyagers as the start, as the first series today. Then features of the Polynesians, Polynesian plant usage for food materials and medicinals, and finally Polynesia today. I like to start my lectures off with a view of Samoa, where I ran an ethnobotany course on site in Samoa, the islands of Samoa. And you can see here two young fellows in their Sunday best, dressed up, and religion has had a profound influence on the cultures of Polynesia. On the upper left-hand corner you can see a style of housing we're familiar with in America and Europe, whereas on the top right between the trees you can see these open type structures, Samoan folly huts or holly huts in Hawaiian, and we'll be discussing those housing arrangements later. The big tree, of course, is a breadfruit tree, an important food source for early Polynesians, particularly for the French Society Polynesians in Tahiti. This is the Polynesian Triangle, as we like to refer to it, with Hawaii at the very north, and you can see it's directly west of Cabo San Lucas, down towards Mexico, and then in the very south west is New Zealand, and then in the far east, southern east, is Easter Island, and in the center is the Society Islands, or French Polynesia, the Marquesas, and to the far west is Samoa, the origin of Polynesian culture. Polynesia means many islands, and you also see Micronesian, meaning small islands, many small islands where exists Kiribati and the Caroline Islands, and then Melanesia, the Black Islands, which encompasses Fiji, Vanuatu, and New Guinea. The Melanesian island people are much darker. They're derived directly from Africa, whereas the Polynesian and Micronesian peoples are Austronesian. An example of this, you can see right off the physical appearance in anthropological terms. The Melanesian woman is darker complected with curlier hair. The Polynesian woman has wavier hair, lighter complexion. They're taller, bigger people with long forearms, slender hands, and what is known as a rocker jaw, which is an anthropological characterization distinguishing the Austronesian people. The origin of Polynesian is totally volcanic. This has resulted in very jagged profiles, deep gorged valleys, and cascading waterfalls, often with barrier reefs and lagoons. And you can see these are some of the most beautiful places on Earth. There's also atolls were occupied by the Polynesians. These are low islands. Here's one near Tahiti, and another near New Zealand, and these have very little water or soil and are difficult to live on. However, they were occupied and still are occupied in Polynesia. We can compare these tropical islands to New Zealand, or Aiteroa, as it's referred to in the Maori language. And the Maori occupy New Zealand. It's a temperate climate, so it has a distinctly different evolution in terms of food base, and their culture diverged to some extent, but it's definitely Polynesian in origin. Here's the origins of the Austronesians. It's believed they came out of Taiwan. This information is based on DNA and anthropological evidence. Then they moved into to the west further, in Philippines, Indonesia, and Madagascar are Austronesian peoples. And then to the east, into Micronesia and Polynesia. They moved through Melanesia, but it's considered what they call the fast boat migration, where they didn't integrate too much with the society and became a separate society into Polynesia. The Taiwanese people, the Austronesians, were not Chinese speaking, but they still represent about 2% of the population of Taiwan. Let's go in and look at the Polynesian Triangle. Now, the early Polynesians migrated into Samoa, and that's believed to be the origin of the Polynesian culture. And the island of Savaii, which we showed earlier, is considered to be the same as the name is Hawaii. So they went from Samoa from 1000 BC and into the Marquesas, and then it's believed from there they migrated north and south. And I've shown them going to Hawaii in the year 500, but recent evidence suggests it might be later in the year 900. They also went about the same time to Easter Island and somewhat later to New Zealand. And it's believed that population pressures or resources motivated these moves. From the Marquesas, they went to the Society or French Polynesia, and then from French Polynesia onto Hawaii also. So there's believed to be 2 migrations to Hawaii and possibly to New Zealand. So this is the movements of the Polynesians. And remember, these islands were not populated by humans, plants and animals only at the time of their arrival. How did they do this? They did this in their great Outrigger canoe vessels. This is one of their Polynesian Voyaging canoes, reconstructed by the Polynesian Voyaging Society in 1979, named the Hakualia. And what they did is they reconstructed this vessel, and they found a navigator, one of the original navigators who had a knowledge of navigation. Remember that they had no sextants or GPS systems, of course, in those times, but they recruited Mau Pailung from the Caroline Islands in Micronesia. They weren't able to find someone from Polynesia, but he agreed to share his seafaring knowledge and guide them from Hawaii to Tahiti, which they successfully did, to a rousing reception in Tahiti when they arrived, verifying the abilities of the early Polynesians to make these long voyages. These voyages were up to 3,000 miles from the Marquesas or the Society Islands to New Zealand, 2,500 miles from there, from the Society Islands and Marquesas to Hawaii, and as well to Easter Island. How did they do this? It was based on their knowledge of sea currents, wind directions, wave actions, seabird pathways, clouds, and star patterns. And these are star maps, and I'll just show one example of a star map. You can see it's quite complicated, and they're in Polynesian language, but we're familiar with the North Star and the Southern Cross for north and south directions. But as the stars set and rise, it would give them a orientation to their direction at night, and they could use other resources during the day. Well, what would you bring on the ship? And it's something you want to think about when you're leaving to go on a 3,000-mile voyage. You have to consider strongly the things that you will need. And what they did, they transported essentially all the plants for food, materials, and medicinals, and they brought their sources of protein other than fish as pigs, chickens, and dogs, also rats. The dogs were for eating. They also ate the rats. The rats may have been stowaways. And archaeological evidence suggests they only took dogs to New Zealand and only chickens to Easter Island, that this may be that they didn't survive the other animal species or protein sources. So this concludes my talk today, and we'll continue with features of Polynesians in the next lecture. Thank you.